Living out here on my ranch was always about peace, wide open spaces, and the simple joys of nature. Nestled on the outskirts of a sleepy little town, my property stretched for several acres, dotted with trees, wildflowers, and my favorite feature, a large, shimmering pond that caught the sunlight like a mirror. The pond wasn't just a beautiful centerpiece, it was a haven for all kinds of wildlife, a natural oasis amid the dry terrain. I'd bought this ranch with a dream in mind, to escape the chaos of city life and build a place where my horses could roam free and live their best lives. Horses were more than pets to me. They were companions, therapy, and a connection to a lifestyle that felt honest and real. I had three of them: Apache, a strong chestnut stallion; Willow, a graceful mare with a calm temperament; and Dusty, a spirited young gelding still learning the ropes. Every morning I'd walk out to the barn, greet the horses, and spend time brushing their coats and checking their health. They loved the pond, especially on hot days when the sun beat down mercilessly and the air shimmered with heat. I'd open the gate to their paddock and let them wander down to the water's edge, where they could drink, splash, and even swim if they wanted. It was a simple pleasure that brought me joy to watch. The pond itself was a natural spring-fed basin surrounded by tall grasses and wild sage. Occasionally, I'd see deer come to drink or hear the croak of frogs in the evening. It was a peaceful sanctuary, a little piece of untouched wilderness I protected fiercely. I was mindful of the environment, too. I kept the area clean, avoided using harmful chemicals, and ensured the horses didn't damage the banks of the pond. Over the years, I'd planted native trees and shrubs to encourage wildlife and keep the soil stable. The ranch was a balance of human care and natural beauty. Life here was slow but fulfilling. I spent afternoons repairing fences, tending the garden, or just sitting on the porch with a cold drink, watching the horses play. Apache would sometimes swim across the pond, his muscles rippling beneath his glossy coat. Willow preferred to wade gently, while Dusty loved to splash water everywhere, turning the calm pond into a chaotic playground. Neighbors were few and far between. The nearest community was a small subdivision a mile away, managed by a homeowners association, HOA. I respected their rules most of the time, but the ranch was my sanctuary, and I lived by my own code. I had heard stories about HOA disputes from friends, neighbors, and even online forums. People losing their lawns, being fined over tiny infractions, or battling over fences and paint colors. It all seemed trivial to me compared to the freedom I enjoyed. Still, I made sure to stay within the boundaries of what was allowed, avoiding unnecessary conflicts. For the most part, the HOA members didn't pay much attention to my ranch. I was outside their jurisdiction in many ways, given the size of my property and the nature of the land. But I knew that wouldn't last forever. The subdivision was growing and new residents were moving in all the time. One of those newcomers was Karen, the kind of person you hear about in stories. The HOA Karen, always ready to police the neighborhood, report violations, and make life difficult for anyone who didn't follow the book exactly. At first, Karen kept her distance, but soon enough, I began to notice her disapproving glances whenever she drove by. She didn't like the horses roaming freely near the pond, or the occasional sound of splashing water that echoed into her quiet evenings. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the ranch and the animals who depended on me. But deep down, I knew the peace was fragile. Living this close to an HOA meant keeping one eye open. Little did I know that peaceful afternoon at the pond, with my horses happily swimming and cooling off, would soon become the spark that ignited a wildfire of trouble. But for now, in this quiet moment, the pond reflected a clear blue sky, the horses dipped their hooves into the cool water, and the ranch felt like the sanctuary I had dreamed of. The ranch had been my refuge for years, a place where the worries of the outside world felt distant and irrelevant. But that calm was about to be disrupted in the most unexpected way. Karen, the new HOA watchdog, had set her sights on me.
Karen was the kind of neighbor who embodied everything people warn you about when they talk about HOAs. She was meticulous, strict, and absolutely convinced that order and control were paramount to a good community. From the moment she moved into the subdivision just down the road, it seemed like she was on a mission to enforce every little rule, no matter how petty or arbitrary. At first, I tried to keep my distance. We had very different lifestyles and priorities, and I thought she'd eventually get bored of me and my horses. But Karen's watchful eyes didn't waver. She started showing up at neighborhood meetings, always the loudest voice in the room, complaining about lawn heights, fence colors, and, of course, my horses. The HOA had a thick rule book filled with regulations about property maintenance, landscaping, and use restrictions. Most residents followed them, or at least pretended to. But my ranch, with its open fields and natural pond, was a glaring exception. The HOA didn't have direct jurisdiction over my property, but Karen acted like she did. I first realized Karen had a problem with me when I found a typed letter slipped under my front door. It was formal, impersonal, and dripping with passive-aggressive language. Dear ranch owner, it has come to the attention of the HOA board that horses are being allowed to swim and bathe in the community pond adjacent to the subdivision. This activity is considered a violation of community guidelines, potentially damaging to the environment, and a nuisance to residents. We kindly request that you cease this activity immediately to maintain the peace and integrity of the neighborhood. I was baffled. The community pond she referred to was actually my private ranch pond, on my private property. I had never once let the horses anywhere near the HOA's area. I wrote back politely, explaining the facts, that the pond was mine and the horses were only on my land. But Karen ignored the reply and escalated her complaints. Next came a series of anonymous emails to the HOA board, complaining about unsightly animals and possible safety hazards. Soon after, I found notices on my mailbox warning that I might be subject to fines for unauthorized animal activity. At this point, it became clear Karen wasn't just concerned about the pond. She was actively targeting me, trying to make my life difficult. One afternoon, as I was letting the horses cool off in the pond during an especially hot day, I noticed Karen's car slowly rolling past my fence. She stared, arms crossed, clearly disapproving. I gave her a nod, hoping to diffuse the tension, but she just shook her head and drove off. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some residents whispered that Karen was just doing her job, while others rolled their eyes, tired of her constant meddling. What frustrated me most was the blatant misunderstanding of my property rights. I owned the land. I had permits for the pond. I cared deeply about maintaining the environment. The horses swimming was a natural, harmless activity, something that brought them relief and joy and posed no threat to anyone. Yet Karen and the HOA seemed determined to paint it as a scandal. Tensions escalated further when the HOA board began sending me official letters, insisting that I stop letting the horses near the water or face consequences. I tried to reason with them at the next HOA meeting, but Karen dominated the discussion. She argued passionately that my actions were reckless and disruptive to the community. Her words echoed around the room, and I felt the isolation creeping in. Some neighbors nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. I realized then that this wasn't just about horses or ponds. It was about control, authority, and a clash of values. I wasn't willing to give up my ranch life just because Karen decided it didn't fit her idea of a perfect neighborhood. But what I didn't expect was the next step she would take, a step that would change everything. Because when she called the cops on me one hot afternoon, claiming the horses were trespassing or causing danger, it set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. And it was only then I discovered the truth about my horses, a truth that would turn the whole neighborhood upside down.
The summer sun beat down relentlessly that day, casting long shadows across the ranch and making the pond's surface glitter like liquid glass. It was the kind of afternoon I cherished, quiet, warm, and filled with the soft sounds of nature. The horses had been restless in the heat, so I decided to open the gate and let them cool off in the pond, their favorite summer ritual. Apache was the first to wade in, his powerful legs breaking the water's surface as he stepped carefully down the bank. Willow followed with graceful caution, her hooves barely disturbing the ripples. Dusty, ever the youngster, charged into the water with a splash, spraying droplets in every direction and clearly delighted. I sat nearby on the edge of the dock, watching them play and drink, feeling a deep sense of peace. This was why I had chosen this life: freedom, nature, and the companionship of these magnificent animals. Suddenly the quiet was shattered by the distant wail of sirens. I frowned, puzzled. There was no reason for emergency vehicles to be anywhere near my ranch. I stood up just as a patrol car pulled slowly down the gravel road leading to my property. My heart raced. What was going on? Before I could process it, two officers stepped out of the vehicle and approached the fence, their expressions serious but polite. "Afternoon," one of them said, tipping his hat slightly. "We got a call about some horses swimming in a pond out here." I blinked in surprise. "That's my pond, and those are my horses. They're just cooling off." The other officer pulled out a notepad. "We've had some complaints from the neighborhood, something about unauthorized animals and potential safety hazards." I shook my head. "There's nothing unauthorized about my horses. They're on my land, and this pond is private property." The officers exchanged glances but didn't press further. Instead, they asked a few questions about the property, the horses' care, and any potential risks. I explained everything honestly, showing them the fencing and permits I held. Despite the polite conversation, I could tell they were uneasy. There was something about the call that didn't add up. As they finished, one officer said, "We just wanted to make sure everything was in order. If there's no problem, then we won't need to take any action." Relieved, I nodded. "No problem here." The officers left, and I watched them drive away, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. The incident seemed minor, but the fact that someone had called the cops on me for letting horses swim in my own pond was unsettling. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch with a cold drink, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You should be careful. People are watching, and they don't like what you're doing." I frowned. Who was this? Was it a warning or a threat? The next morning brought more surprises. As I stepped outside, I saw a small group of neighbors gathered near the edge of the subdivision. Among them was Karen, her arms crossed and lips pursed. She approached me quickly. "I hope you understand that the HOA is serious about this. Letting horses swim in a pond, especially one near the subdivision, could lead to fines or legal action. I took a deep breath. Karen, this is my property and my horses. The pond is on my land, not the community's. I'm not breaking any laws. She shook her head. That's not how it looks to the rest of us. Her words felt like a challenge. It was clear she intended to escalate the issue. Over the next few days, the tension grew. More calls came in from the HOA complaining about my unauthorized activities, and I received a formal notice threatening penalties if I didn't stop letting the horses near the water. Determined not to back down, I continued my routine but kept a wary eye out. The peaceful afternoons by the pond were now shadowed by the threat of conflict. But what I didn't realize was that the horses I thought I knew so well were more than just animals. They had a secret connection to a government agency, and their presence on my ranch was about to draw the attention of people far beyond the HOA. That secret would turn my quiet ranch life upside down, forcing me to confront forces I never imagined. And it all started with a peaceful afternoon, interrupted by the sound of sirens. The following week, the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over in a way I hadn't expected. It started with a knock on the door, sharp, insistent, and more alarming than any I had gotten before. I opened it to find two uniformed officers standing on my porch. Their faces were serious, eyes scanning the property like they were expecting trouble. "Good afternoon," one said, his voice polite but firm. "We received another complaint about animals swimming in the pond on your property." I blinked, confused. "Yes, I'm aware. Those are my horses and the pond is on my land. They swim to cool off on hot days." The officer nodded slowly. "We understand, but the HOA has escalated this issue. They say there's a safety concern and possible trespassing." I frowned. Trespassing. The pond is mine. The horses don't leave my property. They exchanged looks, then asked if they could inspect the ranch. I was reluctant, but understood that cooperation was best to avoid further conflict. As we walked around the perimeter, I pointed out the fencing, the natural boundaries, and the clear signs marking my property lines. The officers took notes, inspected the pond, and even checked the horses for identification tags. One of them asked about water quality and environmental impact, to which I proudly explained the steps I'd taken to keep the pond clean and safe. Despite all this, their faces remained guarded. Something about the call felt off, but they wouldn't say more. After the inspection, they told me they had to report back to their superiors, but assured me no immediate action would be taken unless they found a clear violation. Relieved, but unsettled, I watched as they drove away, wondering who had called this time and why they were so intent on causing trouble. Later that evening, my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. A low, serious voice spoke. "We need to talk about the horses." I was taken aback. "Who is this?" "No time to explain. Just know that those animals aren't what you think." Before I could ask more, the line went dead. My mind raced. What did that mean? Were my horses something unusual? How could that be? I spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, the phone call echoing in my thoughts. The next morning, I woke to find more HOA letters pinned to my door, warnings about fines, demands to stop the unauthorized animal activity, and threats of legal action. Karen's voice was loud and clear in every word, her intent unmistakable. But now, with the mysterious phone call weighing on me, I knew this was more than just an HOA dispute. I decided to investigate. I started by checking the horses' brands and identification tags more closely. What I found surprised me. Each horse had a subtle marking, a small symbol that looked official, unlike the usual brands I'd seen before. I took photos and researched the symbols online, uncovering references to government agencies and special task forces. Suddenly, the pieces started fitting together. These weren't ordinary horses. They were part of a covert program connected to Border Patrol operations in the region. It explained the officer's hesitance, the secrecy, and even Karen's obsessive behavior. Perhaps she had sensed something and reacted out of fear or suspicion. My ranch, once a quiet refuge, had become a stage for something much bigger. I felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. How had I not known? What was my role in this? That same day, the officers returned, this time with a more urgent tone. "We need to speak with you privately," one said. Inside my home, they revealed the truth. The horses were trained Border Patrol mounts, part of a secret operation using natural ranch environments for training and surveillance. My ranch had been chosen for its strategic location and suitability for the program. The HOA's complaints were complicating matters, drawing unwanted attention to a covert mission. I was stunned. All my quiet afternoons with the horses, all the peaceful moments by the pond, were part of something far more complex. But now that I knew, I had to decide how to move forward, protect my ranch, support the mission, and deal with the HOA's escalating interference. The stakes were higher than ever, and the peaceful life I had dreamed of was tangled with government secrets and neighborhood politics. The cop's unwanted visit had opened a door I never expected to walk through. The days following the officer's visit felt surreal. The ranch I had called home for years suddenly seemed like a front in a story far bigger than I'd ever imagined. The horses I had cared for, trained, and loved were no longer just animals. They were assets in a government operation. I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. It all started when the officers sat me down in the modest living room of my ranch house. Their demeanor was unusually serious, and the quiet weight of what they were about to say hung heavily in the air. "Your horses," the lead officer began, "are part of a specialized program operated by the Border Patrol. They're trained to patrol certain terrains, particularly areas near the border that are difficult for vehicles to access." I stared at them, dumbfounded. "You mean my horses are government horses? I had no idea. They just seemed like regular horses to me." "That's the point," he replied quietly. "This program is covert, meant to blend into the environment and assist with patrols without drawing attention." They went on to explain that the program was designed to use natural resources, horses, ranches, and open land, to discreetly monitor suspicious activity near the border. The horses were specially selected and trained to be calm, agile, and responsive to commands, capable of navigating rough terrain that vehicles couldn't reach. Apparently, my ranch was ideal for their operations. It was located in a strategic spot, far enough from the busy border crossings to remain off the radar, but close enough to serve as a staging ground. I asked how my horses ended up here and why I hadn't been informed sooner. The officers hesitated. "You were chosen as a handler and caretaker without your knowledge to maintain the horse's cover. Your daily routines, care, and attention have been crucial to the horse's health and effectiveness." I felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. On one hand, it was incredible to think that the animals I loved were part of something so important. On the other, the secrecy and the intrusion into my private life unsettled me. "Why the secrecy?" I asked. "Because revealing the program could compromise the mission and endanger both the horses and the agents involved," the officer explained. "We try to keep everything as low profile as possible." The conversation took a turn when they mentioned the HOA complaints. "The HOA's interference," the officer said, "is causing complications. They're bringing unwanted public attention, which could jeopardize operations." I nodded, understanding now why Karen had been so aggressive. Whether she knew the truth or not, her actions were disrupting something much bigger. After the officers left, I spent hours with the horses, studying their behavior and the subtle signs I'd missed. The identification marks I'd noticed were official symbols linked to the Border Patrol program, designed to be discreet. Over the next few days, I contacted a trusted friend with military experience to verify the details I'd been told. He confirmed that specialized units often use horses and other natural methods for patrols in difficult terrain. It was a rare but highly effective approach. Still, I wrestled with what this meant for my life. Was I an unwitting participant in a secret government project? What responsibilities did that impose on me? How did I balance my love for the ranch with the demands of this covert mission? The ranch no longer felt like just my sanctuary. It was a piece of a complex puzzle involving national security, surveillance, and border control. Meanwhile, Karen's calls to the HOA board and her attempts to escalate the complaints hadn't stopped. If anything, they had intensified. One afternoon, as I was tending to the horses near the pond, Karen appeared at the edge of my property with a group of neighbors in tow. She pointed accusingly at the water. "This pond isn't just yours, and neither are those horses," she declared loudly. "They're a danger to the community." I took a deep breath and decided it was time to confront the misinformation head-on. "These horses are part of a border patrol program," I said firmly. "My ranch is a critical part of their operations. I'm cooperating fully with law enforcement." The crowd murmured in surprise and skepticism. Karen's face twisted with disbelief and frustration. "You expect us to believe that?" she scoffed. I met her gaze steadily. "Believe what you want. But I'm not going to let false accusations threaten my property or the work these horses do." This confrontation marked a turning point. The neighborhood was divided. Some supported me, impressed by the revelation, while others sided with Karen, wary of government involvement in their quiet subdivision. Through it all, the horses remained my constant companions, their calm presence grounding me amid the turmoil. I realized that the true battle wasn't just about a pond or swimming horses. It was about understanding, trust, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. And now that their true identity was revealed, my role as a rancher had taken on a new, unexpected meaning. The moment the truth about the horses came out, my quiet ranch life was transformed overnight. What had been a simple dispute with the HOA suddenly spiraled into the hottest topic in the neighborhood, and not just for the HOA board or Karen. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and the ranch was the center of an unfolding drama that felt like a small-town saga. Word traveled fast. By the next morning, I was greeted by whispers and sideways glances when I stepped out to feed the horses. Some neighbors came up with curious questions, others with cautious congratulations. A few, however, looked uneasy, as if my involvement with a secret government operation made them uncomfortable or suspicious. At the local coffee shop, the chatter was relentless. "I heard they're border patrol horses," one neighbor said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Isn't it dangerous to have that kind of thing so close to the subdivision?" another asked. "Honestly, I think it's pretty cool. Not many of us can say our horses are working with the government," a third chimed in, smiling proudly. The mixed reactions were a reflection of the division Karen had sown. Her unrelenting complaints had created a rift, making some residents wary of anything remotely connected to the ranch. But others, intrigued by the secret mission and my role in it, wanted to learn more. I received messages from neighbors I barely knew, offering support or asking how they could help. One elderly couple brought over homemade cookies and expressed their admiration for my courage. A young family invited me to a neighborhood barbecue, hoping to bridge the growing divide. Despite the mixed feelings, the community was starting to rally around the idea that the ranch was special, not just a patch of land, but a crucial part of something larger. Karen, meanwhile, refused to back down. Her frustration grew as she realized that the more she pushed, the more sympathy I gained. At the next HOA meeting, she launched into a fiery speech, warning the board about the dangers of government intrusion and uncontrolled activities near the subdivision. Her words stirred unease among some residents, but others spoke up in my defense, sharing what they knew and expressing support for the horses and the ranch. The HOA board found themselves caught between opposing sides, unsure how to handle the controversy. Some suggested compromising by setting guidelines for the horses' presence, while others pushed for stricter enforcement of community rules. In the midst of this, I took the opportunity to address the community directly. I organized a small gathering on my ranch, inviting neighbors to meet the horses, learn about their role, and see the land for themselves. The turnout surprised me. Nearly half the neighborhood showed up, including skeptics and supporters alike. I explained the history of the horses, their connection to the Border Patrol program, and the importance of maintaining the ranch as a secure and safe environment. Many asked questions, and I answered as openly as I could without revealing sensitive details. By the end of the day, the mood had shifted. People who had been suspicious were now more understanding, and the ranch felt less like a source of tension and more like a shared treasure. Karen didn't attend, but her presence was felt in the whispered conversations and cautious glances. She was a force to reckon with, but the neighborhood's response gave me hope. This chapter of conflict was far from over, but the support I found reminded me that community wasn't just about rules and complaints. It was about connection, trust, and standing together. As the sun set over the pond and the horses grazed peacefully, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The ranch was more than just my home now. It was a symbol of resilience and unity amid the chaos. And no matter what came next, I was ready to face it, surrounded by neighbors, friends, and the horses who had become so much more than I ever expected. Despite the growing support from many neighbors, Karen was undeterred. If anything, the increasing community backing only seemed to fuel her determination. She had made it her personal mission to challenge me and regain control over the situation, or at least to make my life as difficult as possible. Within days of the neighborhood gathering at my ranch, Karen began rallying the HOA board and residents who shared her concerns. She launched a full-scale campaign, armed with legal documents, photographs, and a thick binder of complaints she had meticulously compiled over the past few months. Her main argument remained consistent. My horses swimming in the pond and roaming near the subdivision were a violation of HOA rules, a threat to community safety, and a potential liability for everyone involved. Karen circulated petitions, called emergency HOA meetings, and pushed for fines and penalties. She even hired a private investigator to document the ranch's activities, hoping to find something concrete enough to force me into compliance. The atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted again, no longer just whispers or curious questions, but open confrontation. Tensions rose at every HOA meeting, and neighbors who had once supported me began second-guessing, wary of getting caught in the crossfire. One morning I woke to find a formal letter taped to my front door, stamped with the HOA's official seal. It was a cease and desist order, demanding I stop all unauthorized animal activity immediately or face legal action. I was furious, but tried to remain calm. I knew this wasn't just about the pond or the horses anymore. It was a power struggle, and Karen was playing hardball. I consulted my attorney, who advised me to document everything carefully and avoid any direct confrontation. The legal advice was sound but frustrating. It felt like a battle I had to fight not just with paperwork but with my own community. Meanwhile, Karen's tactics became more aggressive. She called local media, framing the story as a rogue rancher ignoring community rules and endangering children and pets with wild horses. One afternoon, a news crew showed up unannounced, cameras rolling as they tried to capture controversial footage of the horses near the pond. I refused to speak to them, but the damage was done. The story aired with dramatic music and sensational headlines, painting me as a troublemaker. It stoked fear and suspicion among residents who hadn't seen the whole picture. At the same time, Karen organized community watch patrols, where groups of neighbors took turns monitoring the ranch and reporting any violations to the HOA. The patrols felt invasive and hostile. They trespassed near the property lines, questioned visitors, and made me feel like a criminal in my own home. Despite this, I held firm. I continued caring for the horses, maintaining the ranch, and cooperating with the Border Patrol program as best I could. But the pressure was relentless. I began receiving anonymous threatening notes slipped under my door, warning me to stop the nonsense or face consequences. One night, I found tire tracks across the field near the pond, as if someone had driven recklessly close to the water, risking damage to the land and the horses' habitat. It was clear Karen's campaign wasn't just about enforcing rules anymore. It had become personal. Still, I refused to back down. I knew the horse's role was vital, and my ranch was more than just property. It was a part of something bigger. The HOA's legal threats and Karen's aggressive tactics tested my patience and resolve, but I was determined to protect what was mine. To regain some control, I reached out again to the Border Patrol officers involved in the program. We discussed strategies for ensuring the ranch's security and legal protections. They advised me to gather official documentation confirming the government's involvement with the horses and to present it to the HOA and neighbors. Armed with this information, I planned my next move, a formal presentation at the upcoming HOA meeting to clear the air and confront Karen's accusations head-on. The stakes were higher than ever. It was no longer just about a pond or some horses. It was about truth, authority, and standing firm against harassment. As the day of the meeting approached, the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Some residents braced for a showdown, others hoped for peace. I prepared myself to speak honestly, calmly, and with all the facts on my side. Whatever happened next, I knew this battle was far from over, but I was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The night of the HOA meeting arrived with a weight that seemed to press down on the entire neighborhood. The air buzzed with anticipation and unease, as if everyone knew this would be the defining moment of our ongoing conflict. For weeks, the tension had built up through whispered conversations, heated emails, and a growing divide that split the community almost evenly. Now the time had come to face each other in a public forum. I arrived early, carrying a folder packed with documentation from the Border Patrol officers, official letters, program descriptions, photos of the horses with their unique identification marks, and legal papers confirming the government's authorization to use my ranch for their operations. I knew that presenting these facts calmly and clearly could be the turning point. The community center was filled beyond capacity. Familiar faces from my neighborhood sat around, some friendly, some wary, and others glaring with suspicion. Karen was already there, standing near the front, arms crossed, eyes sharp with determination. Her presence radiated the same energy she'd had since this entire ordeal began, relentless and uncompromising. The HOA president called the meeting to order, a hint of tension in her voice as she asked for calm and civility. The first order of business was the discussion of my ranch and the complaints surrounding the horses and the pond. Karen was the first to speak. Her voice was loud, passionate, and rehearsed. "These horses are a danger to the neighborhood," she declared. "They swim in the pond, they roam freely near our homes, and the rancher refuses to respect our rules. This isn't just a property dispute. It's a public safety issue. We need to take action before someone gets hurt." A few murmurs of agreement echoed through the room, but others looked skeptical, shifting uncomfortably. When her statement concluded, I took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. I knew this was my moment to change the narrative. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady but firm. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I understand the concerns many of you have expressed, but I hope to clarify the situation and provide the full picture." I laid out the documents before me, projecting a calm confidence I didn't always feel inside. "These horses are part of a border patrol program," I explained. "They're specially trained for surveillance and patrolling near the border, and my ranch serves as a safe and strategic location for this operation." Some in the crowd gasped softly, others exchanged surprised glances. Karen's face hardened, but I pressed on. "I've been cooperating fully with law enforcement to ensure the horses' safety and the community's well-being. The pond and the land are private property, and all activities here are legal and sanctioned by the government." I displayed official letters from Border Patrol, including permission slips and detailed explanations of the program's goals. "I want to assure everyone that these horses are not a threat. They're monitored closely, and I'm committed to maintaining a safe environment for all residents." I paused, letting the information sink in. "For those worried about liability or safety, I'm open to discussing ways we can address these concerns collaboratively. But I ask that we do so based on facts, not fear or misinformation." A few hands raised cautiously, signaling questions and concerns. I welcomed them. One elderly neighbor asked, "How do we know the horses won't wander off and cause problems?" I explained the fencing and natural barriers, showing photos and videos demonstrating the horse's behavior and boundaries. Another resident inquired about environmental impact, to which I responded with details about the care taken to protect the pond and surrounding habitat. Karen stood up abruptly, her voice cutting through the room. "This is all just an excuse to ignore the rules. You're flaunting the HOA's authority, and it's disrespectful." The room grew tense. The HOA president tried to restore order, calling for respectful dialogue. I replied calmly, "This isn't about disrespect. It's about legality and safety. I'm more than willing to work with the HOA, but the accusations must be fair and truthful." Several neighbors nodded in agreement, their expressions showing a shift in attitude. After an hour of questions and discussions, the HOA board decided to table any further punitive actions, opting instead to form a committee to work directly with me on guidelines that balance the ranch's unique role and the community's concerns. Karen was visibly frustrated but outnumbered. Her campaign had lost momentum. As the meeting adjourned, a few neighbors came up to thank me for my transparency and willingness to communicate. Walking back to my ranch that night, I felt a sense of relief mixed with cautious optimism. The showdown had been intense, but for the first time, the neighborhood seemed ready to find common ground. The battle was far from over. Karen would undoubtedly continue her efforts, but I now had allies and a path forward. Most importantly, the horses could roam and swim without fear of unjust interference, and my ranch could continue to be a place of purpose and peace. After the tense HOA meeting, a surprising shift began to take shape in the neighborhood. What started as a bitter conflict slowly evolved into something more complex. An uneasy but growing coalition of support and new challenges that tested my resilience. Some neighbors who had once been skeptical now approached me with questions and offers of help. It was clear that my openness at the meeting had earned their trust. They wanted to understand the Border Patrol horses better, and many were fascinated by the unusual role my ranch played in such an important government operation. One morning, a knock on my door revealed Mr. Jensen, a quiet but observant neighbor who owned one of the largest homes on the block. He held out a folder. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. Maybe there's a way the community and you can work together on this. I have some contacts in legal and environmental circles. Perhaps I can help with the HOA negotiations. His gesture was unexpected but welcome. Having a respected figure like Mr. Jensen on my side gave me renewed hope. Together, we drafted a proposal for the HOA that balanced the needs of the ranch and the neighborhood. It outlined clear guidelines for the horses' care and access, safety measures for residents, and a commitment to protecting the environment. Meanwhile, I continued my work with the Border Patrol officers, strengthening our partnership and ensuring the horses received the best care and training. Their mission remained crucial, and my role felt more important than ever. Yet new challenges emerged quickly. Karen, though temporarily sidelined, wasn't ready to concede defeat. She began rallying a small but vocal group of neighbors who shared her concerns about privacy, safety, and what she called government overreach. This faction started organizing alternative community meetings, circulating rumors, and calling local officials. Their resistance was more subtle but persistent, often framed as a fight for homeowners' rights and transparency. One afternoon, a notice arrived from the city zoning board, citing complaints about the ranch's use and requesting a formal hearing. The claim, my property was being used in a way that violated local ordinances. It felt like an orchestrated move to pressure me legally and socially. I quickly enlisted my attorney, who helped me prepare for the hearing. We gathered all relevant permits, the government authorization letters, and testimonies from neighbors who supported the ranch. The hearing itself was intense. Karen's allies spoke passionately against the ranch, while my supporters defended the importance of the horses and the legitimacy of the Border Patrol program. In the end, the city ruled in my favor, recognizing the legality of the ranch's operations and the critical role the horses played. Though victorious, the experience left me wary. It was clear that the fight was no longer just with the HOA. It had escalated to a broader community and legal battle. At the same time, the horses faced their own trials. One of them, a younger mare named Luna, suffered a minor injury during a training exercise. It was a stark reminder that these animals, while valuable, were still vulnerable. I spent long nights tending to her, deepening my bond with the herd. Their welfare was my top priority, even as the external pressures mounted. In the quiet moments between legal battles and community negotiations, I reflected on the unexpected allies I'd found. People like Mr. Jensen, the elderly couple who brought me tea during tough days, and even some of Karen's fence-sitters who chose to listen rather than judge. The situation was far from resolved, but the growing network of support reminded me that resilience and cooperation were powerful tools. As the seasons changed, I also began exploring ways to make the ranch a positive presence in the community, beyond just the Border Patrol mission. I started hosting educational tours for local schools, teaching kids about horses, nature, and the importance of law enforcement's work at the border. It was a chance to build goodwill and show a different side of the ranch. These efforts slowly softened attitudes and helped humanize the story, not just a property dispute, but a shared space with shared values. Yet, I knew that challenges lay ahead. Karen's persistence meant that no victory would be permanent without vigilance. New issues, new complaints, and perhaps even new players could emerge. But with unexpected allies at my side and a clear purpose guiding me, I felt ready for whatever came next. The ranch, the horses, and the community all intertwined in a story far more complicated and meaningful than I had ever imagined. And I was determined to see it through. The storm of conflict that had engulfed my ranch and neighborhood finally began to calm. After months of legal battles, heated confrontations, and tense negotiations, a fragile peace settled over the community. a peace built on mutual understanding, compromise, and respect. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, I realized that this journey had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, community, and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. The HOA, though still cautious, agreed to a revised set of guidelines for the ranch. These rules balance the unique nature of my property and the Border Patrol program with the community's desire for safety and transparency. The automatic gates were adjusted with input from neighbors to ensure security without seeming intimidating, and regular updates about the horse's health and activities were provided at HOA meetings. Communication became more open, less adversarial. Karen, true to her tenacious nature, remained vocal but gradually lost much of her influence. Her coalition shrank as more residents chose dialogue over division. Even she began attending community events, albeit quietly, perhaps realizing that cooperation was a better path than endless conflict. More importantly, I found a new sense of belonging and purpose. The ranch had evolved from just a piece of land into a hub of community connection and education. The school tours became a beloved tradition. Seeing children's eyes light up as they fed the horses or learned about border security gave me hope for the future. Neighbors stopped by not just to complain, but to share stories, ask questions, and occasionally lend a hand. The horses, too, thrived in this new environment. Luna fully recovered, becoming a symbol of endurance and hope. The herd grew closer, more relaxed, their bond with the community strengthening. On a personal level, the experience humbled me. I understood that ownership isn't just about property rights, it's about stewardship, responsibility, and respect for those around you. I learned to listen more, to find common ground, and to advocate not only for my rights but for the well-being of the entire neighborhood. This journey was far from easy. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and fear, but each challenge made the eventual peace sweeter and more meaningful. Looking ahead, I'm committed to maintaining this balance, honoring the ranch's unique role while fostering harmony with my neighbors. The lessons learned from Karen's persistent opposition and the HOA's initial resistance have shaped me into a stronger, wiser person. I now see my ranch not as a battleground, but as a bridge, a place where different perspectives can meet and coexist. As the sun sets over the pond, the horses grazing peacefully in the golden light, I feel gratitude for the journey, the lessons, the community, and the quiet moments that make this all worthwhile. Whatever the future holds, I know one thing for certain: standing up for what's right, with honesty and compassion, will always be the path to true peace.